We've got a really great panel. I got tasked with wrangling a wide swath of people. Spatial computing, mixed reality, feels a little weird being in the middle of VR. And that's where we're going to start.
Who else is that? Andy.
Come on down. So my name is Boris Mann. I am the founder of Frontier Foundry. We're a venture creation studio that is creating startups from scratch in frontier areas like VR and AR. Mixed reality, again, this placeholder, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. Some people are even just giving up and saying XR. I'm going to have our panelists introduce themselves, what they do, and some of the areas that they're focused on. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Vancouver and how we're well positioned for this area. And then we're going to think about how mixed reality and spatial computing is going to be the next 10 years of human and computer interaction. Take it away, Kharis, to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kharis O'Connell. I work for a company called Meta. We make augmented reality headset. I'm the senior director of user experience there, and we're really concentrating on building out the spatial interface of the future. That's what we're doing.
Thank you.
Awesome. My name is Andrew Couch, founder and CEO of a company called Candy Lab Augmented Reality. We have built and serviced a location-based augmented reality engine, the APIs, and a back-end management system. It's we've built this chassis and an engine you can build apps like Texas Rope'em or Pokemon Go on pretty quickly. Been around since 2010.
I'm Hunter Smith. I'm COO of Finger Food Studios. We've been in business since 2009 doing a lot of mobile applications and now focused on VR and AR the last several years, doing a lot of work on HoloLens and really focusing on industry and industrial applications.
I'm Andy Klein. I work at Microsoft here in Vancouver. I'm a mixed reality artist and designer focusing on new experiences for these emerging mediums.
Hi everybody, my name is Charles Lavigne. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LlamaZOO Interactive. We're a company actually based on Vancouver Island, but still in BC. We develop a platform for distributing 3D interactive educational content and training content, and we sell the modules to universities and industry clients.
Awesome. So we've got a mix of different backgrounds and coming together around mixed reality, which really is still just emerging. One of the things I wanted to start with is just talk a little bit about hardware, because I think that's always an interesting point to think about what capabilities are available today, what people are using with, and where they're finding some challenges with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been going since 2012. We're on our second headset now, the Meta 2. From the hardware perspective, a lot of stuff has changed over the last 2 to 3 years technologically, which has allowed those cost benefits to come back to the end consumer or the end user. And so we're really aiming to make a really cost-effective headset. I think we're selling right now for $949 US. And I think we're trying to drive down that cost because obviously to get it into the hands of more and more people, we're not really expecting the mass market to tolerate high prices, especially at such an early stage in the evolution of the hardware. So, yeah.
As a software company, we can really only go as far as the hardware allows. So I know we tend to cry about what the devices can't do yet, but it has made us get pretty creative over the years where we figured out how to give the best type of an AR experience given where the processors, the chips are. And I'm actually pretty happy about that now because we have a bunch of different versions of our engine. That's about the only good thing to come out of that.
And you've been going since 2010.
2010, been working with similar technology since I was about 19, 36 now, mostly from the military.
And you're deploying mainly on mobile?
iOS and Android, and we have a hybrid solution. You turn the phone in landscape mode, you can jack it into like a Google Cardboard, and you can have a hybrid experience of both portrait mode, AR experiences, and then on the spot, landscape mode, put the cardboard on, view it, take cardboard off, back to portrait mode, you carry on playing your location-based game or having your location-based experience. The core tech behind that we built.
Okay, thank you. Hunter?
I would say honestly, as a software company, we're we're honestly hardware agnostic. It's like, what's the right tool for the job? And all of them have their limitations, right? And so the art really is designing to what that tool does well and not trying to push it where it's not ready to perform yet, right? And I hear a lot of people just kind of complaining that it only does this, or only has this field of view. It's like, well, it is what it is today. So design to leverage that most effectively, and don't overpromise what you can't deliver.
So you talked a little bit how you're focusing on industry.
Yeah.
So a lot of those use cases are coming from there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the type of hardware that you're matching to certain use cases.
Well, some examples are, we use HoloLens a lot recently, and two examples are, one, we built the Lowe's kitchen experience where you're walking around redesigning your kitchen. And you only have so much field of view, but once you come in and you're set up in that field of view, it's an amazing experience to actually walk around what your kitchen's going to be like and change the components and move the size of something up and down to interact with that, because you can't do that from this other screen.
Right.
You might be able to see more at that other screen at one time, but you're not experiencing it. And so the strength is being able to walk around that hologram and experience it in a different way. So design and you also bring your user into the experience so they get over that issue right away, and then they're starting to engage with the content appropriately.
Awesome.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about the right tool for the job. At Microsoft, we have a whole range of devices, from immersive mixed reality headsets, which do inside-out tracking, to the HoloLens, of course, as we've talked about. But even earlier this week, we announced as part of our creators update, a single RGB tracking mixed reality experience. Just uses, any single camera. And I think that getting people exposed to these new emerging mediums on the devices that they're already familiar with is just as valuable as doing it on the kind of higher end multi-sensor devices.
The so-called Pokemon in the room, as it were.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we're really excited about blending hardware. So, every unique platform today has its own limitations, and we don't see that as, constraints, because as creators, you have to work within your constraints, and that's where ingenuity and creativity really flourishes. So, we're looking for ways to use the HoloLens with like Surface Books, or, do app streaming from a high-end PC, and we're rendering like 6 million polygons on the HoloLens with no problem. It's no longer untethered experience, but it's still incredible, and it's tracking in the room, and it's, like you guys said, it's about finding the right tools for the job or the solution. And when you talk to your clients and your customers and you figure out what their problems are, for us in education, it's that they need the content to be in 3D to better understand it. So if we can deliver that in accessible ways, they're going to use it. And that's, I think, what separates the consumer space from education and industry, is that there are immediate use cases today.
And I like what you said about integrating multiple levels of technology, different devices. People are familiar with touch interfaces, and so if you can give them a control mechanism to a 3D world through something they're familiar with, then they can get the value out of it right away. While meanwhile, people are getting used to the idea of voice commands with some of these new products in their homes for, playing their music or ordering stuff online. But they're not used to kind of like commanding their computer with their voice yet. And so in the meantime, the types of initiatives you're talking about, touch input that manipulates a holographic image, that's a very valuable bridge.
I think that's a really good segue, but it also speaks to, okay, so how do we not screw up the user experience and user interfaces of the future? So you just mentioned touch, you mentioned voice. We all know that we pinch things and get pinch strain. That's going to be a new injury. Right, so we kind of have to come together as something that isn't handled like a game, where at the beginning of every app you have to learn how to use it. That will slow adoption. So what are we going to do to integrate some of these UI and UX, and what are some of your thoughts on things that you think your company is doing interesting, or something that you've seen that is heading in the right direction?
I think if I could kind of start from the game industry, we've always had this problem with like verbiage and definitions and language. And it's something that the film industry is really good and quick at defining. It's like, it's a set, it's an actor, it's a boom, it's, they that industry was able to accelerate past its infancy because everybody got around to a common shared language. And the sooner we can do that in augmented reality and any of the realities, the faster we're going to be able to execute on adoption, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we call it the natural machine. So we're really trying to build and take into consideration that the way we'll interact with computers in the future is not just going to be, literally breaking it out of the two-dimensional screen and putting it up necessarily in front of you. Some of those things make sense, but one of the things that we're really exploring is a new way to interact with the data and with the actions and objects around you. And those rule sets, to your point, is really important to lay down, because right now there's no common way that we can share experiences. If you're looking at things like leaving virtual objects in a room for others to use, we have to have a way to share topology maps. We have to look at permissions. We have to look at who's able to do what will happen if you give permission to everybody. And it's actually at Meta we call it's a wicked problem. It is a problem that of the last 20, 30 years of computing has been quite literally and figuratively boxed in. And now that we've been unleashed, you would think that this should be easier, but it's actually this freedom has a new level of responsibility for all of us. And so, that's really something that we're really passionate about trying to solve at Meta.
Yeah, I'm curious to understand how fast voice will sort of leapfrog the need to come up with lots of gestures that make sense in this language or that language or another place, another place in the world. And, the voice recognition has accelerated really in the last 5 years, much faster than it did in the 20 years before, right? With neural networks really changing it from phenomes to context, right? And being able to process much faster. So to me, that feels like probably one of the ideal solution sets is to enable people to move past, trying to come up with conceptualizations and be able to actually verbally interact more quickly.
So on the panel, how many of you are working with voice interfaces today? Except he has a user base of 9 billion devices or something like that.
We're doing
today.
something with sound. We just have to be very private about it until we can get confirmation back from the USPTO. Yeah. But if I can now jump in on that one. So y'all, this is what we've done. So we primarily work on the mobile phone, and we've been trying to sell location-based AR in the US since about 2011. And every time I would go into a customer pitch, they'd say, there's no way people are going to hold their phone up like this, and they're going to tap on it and interact with content on the screen. So we had to get real creative if we wanted to make money and keep our lights on, and how to make that work. So think like bowling. You know how they put the bumpers down the end of the bowling lane? So if the ball goes to the side, it kind of bumps it back in the middle. It's bumper bowling. No. So because the device has a gyroscope and an accelerometer on it, its positioning in time space at any given time. So if the phone is pitched down, we make an arrow that says pitch up. If it's pitched up, we can put an arrow that says pitch down. Same thing with left and right to kind of keep them where you want to go. And a lot of that was from, this is what you work on here, UI and UX. It had nothing to do with tech updates, the compass, how we do our smoothing, crown handling algorithm, none of that. It was all graphics that just said, hey, go this way, like Call of Duty. Left arrow, come back into the play zone. And that's what we've been playing around with, and we found that to be pretty successful. Just the graphic overlays, like the da-da-da arrow back end, and that's how we've solved it, or at least for our product.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this space is leveraging things people are already familiar with. And like you said, the UX of using new mediums. So we have a core gesture set that we use, and when you use a mouse today, that's an indirect movement. You move something here and it moves up. And in some ways, you've eliminated that when it's just wherever you look. You don't have to have this secondary movement. It's a little bit more natural, just a little bit. But who's used to driving a mouse with their face? Not a lot of people, However, other things start to build up. These subtleties can build up. So the air tap gesture, for example. Well, guess how you click a mouse? You move that finger. Okay, and so we just have to work with the sensors we have to identify something that is somewhat familiar to people. And through time and experience, these things start to become more commonplace, and there can be a subconscious association with those familiar past habits. You're just kind of accessing them in a new way.
But aren't all the people who learned how to use a mouse dead?
Well, touch screens, you mean? You mean like how 2-year-olds go up to a big screen TV and start touching on it?
I do it on my own.
I like how you guys have the circle, actually. That was pretty easy. We went and bought, it's like 2 dev kits in Irvine, and we got back to the office, and it was like Christmas. We just started playing with them, because we had the idea for the beacon sniffing code I was telling you about, just the idea at the time. And we fired it up, connected it to Wi-Fi. We started playing with the holograms, we're like moving it around. And I think within about the first minute, I'd say that within the first 90 seconds, I knew to keep the circle on the actual target until it went around and it opened it. Sure. So then I was just doing everything hands-free, and that's what gave us the idea to, just look for the beacon to show battery power and change the content on it. But I think that actually was the no-brainer for us, was the circle that you guys did. Just keep it on there until something happens.
What's really interesting, some of the people on stage are competitors, some of them work together. At the early stages of this mixed reality, we know there's sort of a 5 to 10 year arc before it gets glasses sized. Maybe I'll ask that of each of you, of when you think that's going to happen, and we'll have it immortalized and see how right you are. Because these things are so early, and we're having to learn together, and we're having to work together to get this out there, because it's a very small group that's working on it, and coming out of a space where mixed reality has actually been around, and augmented reality has been around for 10 years. There's just a bunch of new technology that's making it even more possible, accessible, and inexpensive, and everything else like that. I want to pause and say, does anyone have a question for the panel that they'd like to come up? Okay, I want to know, when are we going to have glasses on our face with nothing but ads filling in every crack of reality? Who wants to go first?
I'll go
Okay.
first. So let's separate the piece of glass from the ads. They don't have to necessarily go together. I will say, from what I know, that within 3 years you will have a piece of hardware that is not offensive to wear all the time.
So you're thinking chunky 90s style glasses.
Well, they may come back in again, These things tend to go around. But in terms of advertisement, one of the things we're trying to do as well at Meta is make sure that we don't have that world of anybody, one of the things we're trying to address is the incredible amount of responsibility you will have when you put these things on people's faces. Like, nobody wants to think about the use cases of, awesome, we got Dinosaur that can deliver your email. But when it jumps out in front of you and you crash your car, or you're walking down the street and something leaps out in front of you, it's going to be lawsuit central, right? It's a poor design paradigm to say we're going to fill the world with things that you cannot comprehend, advertisements popping out everywhere, and think that there's no consequence for that for society, or think that there's no potential danger to that, because there really is. So in a nutshell, we are looking at ways to make sure that is not the world we will have in the future.
Meta says 3 years, no ads. Yes. Okay. Over to you.
So I feel that who's watched that South Park episode, how ads are evolving? Still, up here, nice, one person, multiple people. Where I see it happening is let's just look at Pokemon. Storytelling on location that suggests that there's something that they could purchase around them through an experience, I think is where we're going to see it go. I look at industrial grade headsets, from our colleague down the row here, really capitalizing on, say, agriculture, potentially military, education. Whereas I see more like a Meta, I see more consumer applications, something that I'm going to put in my pocket and walk around with me all the time, right? I think we're going to see a few winners, and they're going to be really known for that vertical that they go into. There'll be overlap, but I look at it from the software side, because we can only live up to the line that you guys provide the hardware for, really. So we try to pay attention, who's good at what, who has back-end admin tools, who doesn't, who can focus more on the experience. And that's really why I say it that way, on this panel. But you guys are familiar with Google Cardboard, $1.22. You can, down and dirty, just like someone going in to watch a movie, give them this branded cardboard. It's not like what these guys are offering right here, but it can give them just enough of an experience to where it gets them educated, and now they start going out and looking for the device that works best for them. I think we'll see about 3, potentially 4 market leaders in the next 2 years. And I think by year 3, year 4, I actually think it's going to be both these guys right here that are going to take on the market, one on industry, one on industrial, one on consumer. I don't really see Spectacle unless they can get a 2.0 version to come out and start partnering with you guys maybe a little more on some of the inner chips, unless they can start buying them in scale to get their cost point down. If they can figure that out, then I think Spectacle would be a solid competitor as well for consumer.
2 years, you'll love the ads, and Spectacles is dead. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think in industry, it's a different requirement for industrial use cases than it is for consumer, right? Industrial use cases, a lot of people are already putting glasses on when they go to work. They've got
Right.
safety glasses.
Yeah.
They carry different things around to be able to be hands-free, to be able to get a right set of information to you at the right time. They're looking for the reason to try to adopt it more quickly, right? So a lot of it's about being able to have the ecosystem and enough of the solution set coming together so that you are delivering the right information to the right user at the right time. And in our interactions with a bunch of companies, I expect them, and some of them are actually starting to use it now. So I think it's going to become more widely used in the next year to two in the industrial space.
Right.
But that's because someone's willing to wear a little heavier thing that they feel kind of geeky on, but they don't think about it. They're at work, right? They're getting information faster, right?
Just like people have multiple monitors at
Exactly.
work, but
Right.
use an iPad or a laptop or a Surface at home.
Absolutely.
Put that in there.
Yeah, I'm going to go against the grain of it here and not address the Spectacle question, but address the marketing and ads
Okay.
question. I think the pervasiveness of augmented reality and mixed reality is not going to be through industry or consumer devices. It's actually going to be from the advertising industry. How many billboards did you guys see today coming into the conference center? How many screens did you see? In 2 to 5 years, most of those could be replaced by holograms. I'm sure you've all seen Ghost in the Shell. They're projecting these massive holograms on buildings through windows. They're going into your living room. There's nothing you can do to stop them because they're being projected into our real environment.
That's terrifying.
I know.
Nice. So
But that's the world we live in right today.
who cares
There's
about hardware?
advertising
Ads are
everywhere.
here today, and they're going to eat your face. And actually, you said 1 year industry today, and you said, I don't care, I'm going to sell it to industry, and they're going to love me, just to summarize, right? You're going to take us home here, just on this question.
Hardware is not my area of expertise. However, I will say this. It's an incredible balance from a lot of different disciplines to make these types of products. You've got things like power consumption. And power consumption means you got to have a battery. Batteries are heavy. You have things like heat. There's a new thing to, how hot does your processor get if you're wearing it in a pair of glasses next to your face? There's the optical quality and, of course, the field of view. And all of these are different, really cutting-edge areas of research right now. And so the ability to get those different research angles all together into one product, that's one thing in itself. But I kind of think that it's going to be about the experiences. What are you doing with these things? Even if it is glasses, well, am I wearing them in my house to check out my social media, or am I doing work stuff with it? And I think that, of course, what's going to drive it is going to be where you can be more profitable, more effective, and more efficient because of the technology. So whether that's consumer or industry or both or a mix, I'm not sure. It's going to happen. We're going to get there.
I think that's a really, really interesting point. Again, just to kind of think about that through, is I feel what we're also pointing at is that there are going to be multiple devices. It's not going to be the mobile phone eating everything, that there's a couple of different variations that are going to go at different rates. And what I heard you say was some will be consumer fit, aka likely ad supported or trends towards being less expensive, and industry will pay whatever it needs for. So you've been doing work with NASA. I think you did some work with the US military in your background in this area, right? So the two paths is what you're saying.
Yeah.
How many years?
Some years.
Kharis, did you want to jump in on something?
No, I was just thinking, all the talk about advertisement, just reminding me there was the chief scientist from Meta, Steve Mann,
No relation.
Yeah, no.
No.
He doesn't know you.
No.
I asked him. He a few years ago came up with this real life ad blocking software for headsets, so that it would detect logos in your environment, like real logos, and they would replace it with Wikipedia, so that you would never ever see advertisement again, whether real or non-real. And this is actually being developed right now. So it's something that, as much as we say the world could potentially be filled with holograms, those holograms can also be immediately destroyed and replaced. So it's going to be incredibly hard for the ad agency to keep up with that. So
Amazing.
Have you seen that South Park episode? They just keep getting better and better and better.
it's true.
So I wanted to cover one last point. So people on the panel come from different backgrounds. Something that I've noticed, I come from more of a web, internet, mobile background. And when I first started getting involved in VR and mixed reality, the mind break of having to think in 3D and graphics programming and a bunch of other things was really hard for me. But it was a new set of capabilities, so I used my existing toolkit of building products. I talked to some people in gaming who knew how to build games and build storylines, but didn't necessarily know how to do user research for practical products. And Vancouver has a little bit of both, plus film, as you mentioned, so I think we're really well positioned. But maybe the panel could talk a little bit about some of the skill sets that you're looking for within your organizations, or things that you're struggling with, that when you bring someone on, they just go through this period of like, oh, this is totally different.
Well, on my side, obviously, we're always looking for designers, and really, we're talking about more interaction designers. You could argue from a two-dimensional, I guess historically, a two-dimensional background, because what they bring to the table, which is alongside obviously the 3D developers, is a sensibility around logic and structure of information, so they're less focused on the presentation layer and more focused on what is the rule sets that will guide how these things work together. Are we going to fill the world with virtual objects that have no logic attached to them, they're just there as trinkets? Or are we going to devise a systemic way of interaction and behaviors that take into account a whole bunch of different aspects of context, location, interaction, collision detection, all of these things? And that's really hard. I often give talks to the design world, and a lot of 2D designers are terribly scared of AR, MR, whatever you want to call it, Star R or whatever, New R, whatever. The thing on your face, the technology on your face. I think it was Tom Emmerich, we just said it's face tech, right? So, getting them into that space is incredibly hard because there are no best practices yet. There's nothing. So, but we really look for those sorts of people.
At Microsoft, we look for similar things.
Yeah.
The logic flow of how you access the information is so very important. But the HoloLens, its job, or what it does, is constantly evaluate your environment and generate a 3D model from what's around you. And so, also being an untethered device, having expertise in rendering and systems and memory management that comes from like real-time interactive games is super valuable, because you're able to, manage those system resources responsibly, and you pair that type of expertise, interactive designers, programmers, with the more kind of traditional logic-based designers, and I think it's a synergy there. And also, you do need the film industry people to imagine the future so we can go out and build it. It's so multidisciplinary, and of course you need your really good PM to make sure the budget works and you're doing stuff on time, because these are businesses at the end of the day. So
it's definitely seen at Finger Food. There's a lot of guys with console background, so there's a lot of 3D experience in the organization. So that's one part of it, was being able to interact in 3D. The other part was to be able to manage assets getting through pipelines, especially when you're working with industry and they've got CAD files that are really large, and how do you display those on an untethered version of the device, right? And so there's that sort of technical artist skill, which is a really interesting skill set, right? You have to have the technology chops and you have to have an artistic sensibility about what you're displaying when. And I think the other component that's really interesting to me is information. In the industrial space, people are looking for, how do I play with data, or how do I get the right data in the right way? And we could just take a bunch of 2D dimensional graphs that we already have and just plop them up anywhere, but you're really not getting anything better, and you're not getting the opportunity to interact with information at scale. And I think that's a really interesting challenge, and I think that's the user experience designers are really loving that problem. Like, oh, this is really engaging. I'm thinking about presenting data to a person at scale in a way they've never been able to interact with before.
Awesome.
For us on mobile, straight up low DPI count. Learn how to use sprites. They're lightweight and they work well on all the phones. If they can get past that, they can work with us. It's the only way we can make it work on old phones and new phones. Low DPI count. You can't get away with creative shading anymore. You can't hide your mistakes that way. You got to straight up build it 360 all around. And if you know how to work with sprites, you can work with us for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, kind of echoing everything that was said. So user experience design with technical chops, and we primarily hire from the game industry.
Yeah, they're really good. They seem to know what they're doing right from day one with this.
So again, Vancouver well positioned. We are a little bit over time. On Twitter, look for hashtag Mixed Reality CVR. I'm going to be inviting all the panelists to tweet a couple of interesting links that'll provide background. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.